James Farr live from Pasadena Media Studios. Get ready for more piercing and provocative. The Conversation Live starts now. And welcome to another episode of The Conversation Live. The Conversation Live focuses on social justice, restorative justice, inclusion, and equality. Coming up today, Pasadena Vice Mayor Felicia Williams is in the seat. Today we're going to unpack her City Council District 2 re-election campaign. We'll talk to the Vice Mayor on the other side of this break. And welcome back. Thanks to our friends over at Pasadena City College for their generous support of the Conversation Live. Vice Mayor Williams, you're here. Thank you so much for being in the seat.
Yes, thank you. It's nice to be here. Good to see you.
Absolutely.
Nice suit.
Thank you. You're one that I've welcomed this opportunity to sit down with you, and I hope in a future conversation we can get more into some more broader or even specific issues. But today we want to talk about your election, your re-election campaign, right? That's the focus of the day. Okay. We'll have plenty of time to unpack what issues are important to you. I do want to get to know you a little bit more, better. You're a Pasadena native, born and raised here. You're educated here, and then you have studied at Stanford, UCLA, University of Michigan. Pretty accomplished academically. You've held many posts in city commissions, and I know all of that is a fuller story, right? But I really wanted to talk to you today, and we'll get to the campaign issues, but how has that experience informed you to be a city council member?
And it's interesting being on your show because you do focus on social justice and equality and inclusion. I'm going to share a different part of my background with you that I normally, wouldn't share with people.
Let's talk, okay.
So I was born and raised in Pasadena, and what's very different is I had a mother who immigrated from the Philippines and a dad who, I'm going to say, immigrated from Florida.
Florida does sometimes seem like another country.
Yeah,
that's a different show.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, exactly. So I think I have a very different background in that I had two, not only cultures, ethnicities, races in my house, and that kind of informed a lot of how I make my decisions. So my mom was a little bit more conservative. She was a business owner, she was a realtor, had a small business, owned a pharmacy for a while. They were both pharmacists and met at USC. People are always saying, oh, did they meet in the military? No, they actually met at USC. And my dad was a pharmacist as well, so they both had PhDs. And they taught me some very unique lessons growing up, and I think that's why I tend to approach some of these issues from a very different perspective.
How so?
And I think I approach things from more of an economic perspective, which is very different. I'll talk a little bit about social justice growing up. The first interaction that I had with it, my dad came home one time, and he brought us some little grape plants. They were little grapevines in cups. And he said, from now on, we're going to grow our own grapes because we're boycotting grapes because of the United Farm Workers.
Okay.
And that was sort of our first introduction to social justice and those sorts of issues. And I grew those grapes for years in my backyard. But that was always his approach, was we weren't necessarily out on the front lines, but how do we approach it economically and how do we affect it financially? And both of my parents, they weren't the first to go to college, but they were the first to get advanced degrees. And they always really put in my head that having an education, you can achieve what you want to achieve. And being financially independent, you can then also achieve economic and social justice. So that is how I usually approach these things. A very different approach. I will look at the economics, I will look at the jobs, I will look at the funding, I will look at the training, as opposed to looking at the other end of the spectrum, which I think is probably more the public safety side of the spectrum, those sorts of things. I'll kind of be over here on this side of the spectrum.
Okay. Well, I mean, I would we could obviously talk about the economic
Yeah,
impact,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
And
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole economy around
Yes.
the public safety aspect of it. Your father, from what I'm told, I never knew him, didn't have an opportunity to
If
meet
you come to
him.
one of my events, he'll be there.
Oh,
He's turning
okay.
91 next month.
Okay, well, I understand
Yes.
he is a very revered and storied community elder,
Yes.
and had a lot of influence with young folks in the community. How did that kind of shape you? I get the economic side
Yes.
of things and the finance side of things, but how did his community give back inform you?
So my dad, where he contributed was in public health. And so if you remember Wilma Allen, who was here, she was the head of our public health department. My dad was instrumental in working with her to get the new public health facility up on North Fair Oaks. So that was kind of one of his big projects. And what's interesting about my family, so my dad was in public health. My sister is in, she worked for a politician, for an elected official, and then I kind of have a background in finance and also the environment. So we get together, we have the best family discussions on all of these policies. But my dad, so he worked with the public health department. He also did a mentoring program at Muir High School. And it's interesting, the kids now are probably in their 30s,
Okay.
and he still refers to them as the teenagers. Well, you know, the teenagers, I'm consulting with the teenagers, they're in their 30s. And he really raised them through that program, helped support them, helped some of them go to college. Dominic Corey is one, so I consider Dominic Corey my adopted brother because he's one of the teenagers. And my dad really helped him go to college and helped him through his career. So my dad was really focused on public health, and that's probably where I would say his biggest contribution was. But my mom is also a very revered member of the community because she basically was people's first interaction with Pasadena because she sold them their homes. And so my mom is very big in the Filipino community, which may not be known as much, Filipino and Asian, and also in the Armenian community.
Okay.
So a lot of Armenians came over at that time in the 70s and 80s when my mom was selling homes to them.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to, we focus, as you said earlier, social justice, restorative justice, inclusion and inequality. We cover police, right? That is a subject that our audience is very comfortable with and wants to be better informed. So I'll ask you the same question I asked Rick Cole.
Okay.
Can our police department be doing a better job?
Oh, definitely.
How so?
So the police department, there's always improvement. And I would actually approach the improvement from a different side. I think that there are things from the CPOC, I should probably not use acronyms, the Police Oversight, Community Police Oversight Commission, the Independent Police Auditor, and from the McLean Report. I think there are a lot of things for us to learn in there. The one that I'm the most focused on is the pretext stops. I'd like to look at that if there are alternatives and ways that we could do that in a much better way, where we can still achieve the same result. And
what have you learned from, you mentioned the OIR review, pretextual stops. Like what are you learning? Because I know when you're on the dais, you're probably one of the least are outspoken. At least maybe that's how people hear it, right? Or see it or experience it. Are you thinking something different? Are you muting yourself? Are you feeling informed?
And this goes back to what we just talked about. The way I approach it is from the other side.
The economics.
So I see, economics, quality of life, how do we improve people's lives and deal with violence as a whole in the city? So I would say when you talk about can our police do better, the question to me is can we reduce the violence in the city? So that's kind of the question to me, because that's part of the police, but that's also part of the community. But going back to the OAR report, I think the biggest thing that I focused on, and I did make comments at the city council meeting, was the pretext stops, and I'm very interested in that. I think the other things we're going to come back and look at, and mostly through public safety, but that's also why I'm not on the public safety committee. If we get to a topic that involves municipal services, which I'm the chair of, you'll probably hear me go on and on, right? Because that's my background. But in terms of the police doing better, I think the other thing that people really don't emphasize enough is having our high schoolers get into the police department. And that's why Police Activity League and Explorers is very important. They're both in my district now at Jefferson Elementary School. But when we have people from the community, it's not an us versus them, it's an us and us.
Okay.
And they have a better understanding. And if you remember, that's what we used to have in the police department, especially with a lot of the senior African American police officers. That's what we are losing now. So I'm trying to bring a little bit of that back, and I think that's one area that people don't talk about where we could really improve.
Let's talk about the campaign.
Okay.
What are your 3 priorities?
There you go, right to the meat of the matter. I think the first thing, going back a little bit, I really only have had 2 years in office, if you think about it, because 2 years we were locked up and I was figuring out how to unmute myself on Zoom. Okay, so really 2 years dealing with the after effects of COVID, but one of my biggest areas, and this is because of what was revealed during COVID. COVID kind of unearthed a lot of things that were already there. I think social justice and George Floyd did that as well. But the number one thing I want to work on is social services for individuals. And that kind of goes to, we have our own health department, which is very unique, but the health department's funding is very volatile because it's all grant funded. Can we look at a way to fund that through the general fund? And when you look at the public health department, that goes to the Office of the Young Child. That goes to our police outreach team, Port. That also goes to the HOPE team, and that also goes to the Port team. That's how they get their funding to deal with issues of mental health and substance abuse in a non-confrontational way. And so one of the things I want to do is really expand that funding. Secondly, a big area of mine is land use. And a lot of people like to talk about housing. Housing is one type of land use, right? There's commercial, there's industrial, there's open space. There are different types of land use. With housing, the most important thing for me is what you're seeing, James, is people are building luxury housing in Pasadena. That does not answer the needs of Pasadena, and that does not address the needs of the current residents here or people whose kids are growing up and want to stay here. So I have really been pushing for, and I've done this in the past 4 years in office, is mixed income housing and different types of housing, so there's ownership and there's rental, so that people have that opportunity to build that. And I would say the third area of focus for me is really getting to the root causes of homelessness. And that's being able to talk about the mental health and the facility that the city is partnering with the county on at the Kaiser Clinic. That is a game changer. That is the first in the county and maybe one of the first in the state. That is an outpatient mental health and housing facility, so you can deal with them both at once. And I think that's going to be a very big deal for us. I'm working with the mayor and with Catherine Barger on that.
Yes.
And then also prevention. We are one of the only housing departments that provides a rent subsidy program. So I'd like to expand that through the Housing Trust, which is with the 3 cities. We could expand that funding. And then lastly, dealing with substance abuse and domestic violence. So many people don't realize that domestic violence is one of the top causes of homelessness among families. And so in 2 weeks, you're invited. You could probably watch, I don't know if you could take the class, it's a women's empowerment class. But you're welcome to come.
I'm all about empowerment.
Yes, exactly. And bring Tamika.
That's a whole nother. But
okay,
go ahead.
Yes, exactly. Okay.
You were going to trigger some inclusion there, right?
Yeah.
But
okay.
Ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
But it's a women's empowerment class to teach people how to recognize domestic violence, and we're partnering with PUSD. We're partnering with Shepherd's Door, Peace Over Violence. How to recognize it, what the resources are, and then there is a component for women's self-esteem and empowerment, and some physical aspects of self-defense.
Let me call you back into into the affordable housing area, right? And this is something I've asked all candidates, right? Yes, there are there's a lot of development here in the city. We see it popping up everywhere, right? But I think when we hear affordable housing, right, it almost becomes a euphemism. I mean, are we talking about workforce housing? Or are we talking about subsidized? Are we talking about low income?
Yeah.
Are we talking, affordable kind of becomes this blanket title, right? And
yes.
What's affordable for you?
But there is a technical definition.
I understand that, right? But
I'm a technical person.
But the nuance of that, we don't have time to completely. Okay. But here's where I'm going with this.
Okay.
Why don't we hear from our electeds? Like, if something was greenlit tomorrow, right? Everything, all of the things that you would look at, right? The study surveys, EP, everything, right?
Yeah.
Why don't they just say outright, it'll be 10 years before the inventory of this particular housing is available for the public, right? It's not an immediate solution. So we hear build. Why don't we hear that?
Because cities don't build housing. That is the biggest part. We have no control over it. We can do the zoning, and this is a very important technical point, that people are pushing for more affordable housing in Pasadena, yet we lost all of our funding for affordable housing in 2012. And that is one of the biggest fights that we have with the state, is give us back some money so we can do exactly that. But what I will say is there are 3 affordable housing developments in my district. And if you look at these, very difficult to build, and they're receiving city funding, 2 of them. One is a mixed income housing project, which is exactly what we're talking about. And the other one is for PCC students, where PCC Foundation is paying their rent. And the third one is for transition age emancipated foster youth. Almost impossible to get, but we are doing it in my district, in my community, with the support of the public. So there's your green light, and I'm an elected official, and I'm telling you, we're doing it. But it is very difficult to do because we don't have control over it, and we don't have the funding to do it.
Cities' infrastructure. Cities across the state are 100 years old, right? Where things are eroding. This brings you into your space of the environment and water. We use drinkable water to flush our toilets. What's your plan? Like, how do we shore up the infrastructure? Because the way I see it is we're leaving a bill for my children, right? Yeah. Problems for them to repair. How do you shore that up, fix those issues?
So there are new ways of financing infrastructure at the state, and my personal opinion is that the city does not pursue enough of that funding. What we do pursue, if you look at like the Union Cycle Track, the traffic circle, we do pursue funding for road improvements for safety. But there are other improvements where you could do reflective surfaces on the road when you repair them. We could be doing our water and sewer. We do have our own utility, so we issue water bonds to do that. We had a purple pipe, what you call a recycled water project, which would do exactly just that. We wouldn't be watering the Rose Bowl's lawn with drinking water, right? Which is just an incredible, waste of resources. But that project did not get funding, and it also had some opposition to it. So we kind of need to relook at that. So in terms of infrastructure, one, it's our capital improvement plan, but our capital improvement plan, as you know, sits there for 10 years and nothing gets done. What we just did a few months ago is we expedited the repair of our roads because they're so bad after the rains. So we doubled the amount annually that we're putting in the roads. We went from 6 million to 12 million, so we can just catch up. But we need to do that with more other things, and I always say the best money is free money, and I say we do it through grants. And I'm helping a lot of the departments apply for some of the grants that I apply for my clients. We should be doing more of that.
When you're out there campaigning, stomping, walking your neighborhood with your constituents, what are they telling you? What are they saying, Vice Mayor Felicia? What are you hearing from them? Are there issues?
So the main issue, I've got to be honest with you, the number one issue, and it's not just campaigning, but it's also being in the office, the number one issue we hear complaints about is nuisances. And sort of being specific,
what does that mean? Yeah.
Being specific on that is people who feel very concerned for their safety because of nuisance activity that's going on. Drug dealing, guns, violence, other types of activity, and it's usually associated with a property. So that, I spend probably a third of my time with the city attorney and the prosecutor and code enforcement going after these things to make sure that we have a safe environment for our constituents to live in. Very different from what we look at citywide on the council, right? It's like totally different issues. The other things that I'm hearing from the constituents is just public safety. And public safety from the perspective of people not feeling safe walking. We've had a recent rash of burglaries of our postal workers. So their trucks got raided and they got robbed. So that's not good. That's not safe. And then the last thing we hear is traffic speeding and traffic improvements. Those are probably the top. That's probably 75, 80% of what we hear and what I deal with.
Pasadena is known for being a city that it's not easy to do business with and in. The permit process, streamlining
Depends on what kind of
things,
business.
depends,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But
yeah.
you know, when we're looking at through the lens of small businesses,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is kind of the crux of our
Yes.
community and society, like,
Yeah.
is it the city's job to help these businesses open, be successful?
Yeah.
Like, how do you see that, and your role in helping, or the council's role in helping small business owners?
And part of what I do for a living is called economic development, right? And that's promoting a diverse economy through businesses, and small businesses are kind of the backbone of that. We have a very good economic development department. They're starting with an economic development strategic plan, and I think in there is where we can address the city doing outreach to small businesses to help them. Now, a couple of weeks ago, our economic development department did outreach to local vendors to teach them how to apply to be vendors to the city. And so we should do the same thing with our small businesses. How do we kind of get past these permits? What I find when somebody's having trouble with a permit, it's usually kind of like a he said, she said thing. Well, I submitted these plans, oh, but they weren't complete. Oh, but I submitted them, but they weren't. So you kind of need, and that's where my office comes in and tries to shepherd that, but we shouldn't have those kind of disconnects going on that cost people money, and small businesses don't have the resources to be able to cover that. So I think through the Economic Development Department, through the new specific plan or the strategic plan, we should have outreach to small businesses to help them through the process. And I'm a small business too. So I have a business license here in Pasadena, and it's confusing.
We're getting short on time.
No,
so
okay,
I know
okay,
I told you
okay,
it goes
I know,
fast.
okay.
But I wanted to reserve some time, right? Because
Yeah.
I think the question that folks want to hear from you is, you were running for assembly.
Yes.
Then you decided that was, well, I'll let you say why.
Yes, thank you.
In your
Okay.
own words.
Okay. So I ran for assembly. I filed in January. And the main reason why is from my work consulting with cities and my experience on the council, our hands are tied on so many things at the city. You just talked about affordable housing. We don't have our funding. We lost tens of millions of dollars of funding annually because of the loss of redevelopment. And so I wanted to go up to the state and try to address that to make things easier and better for the cities to be able to accomplish their goals. I was supported by Anthony Portantino, our senator, and so I started off on that path. But what I heard, it's interesting, what I heard outside of Pasadena is, thank God you're running, because you understand this stuff. I had a lot of support outside of Pasadena. What I heard in Pasadena is, we want you to stay here. And so what ended up happening with my fundraising, and you could see it in my fundraising, I raised about $100,000, which is a good number to have, but people said, well, I would donate more if you were running for city council. And that was my base. Those were my constituents. And so I decided to listen to my constituents. It took a lot of self-awareness and humility to be able to do that, because some people will just keep on running even though they know they're not going to win. But I had to do that. I had to preserve the funding. And I went back to my constituents and said, do you want me to run for city council? And the overwhelming answer was yes. So I'm out there stomping the grounds, as you say, running for city council. And you know what? It feels very natural. The fundraising is not as difficult. It feels very natural. So I think I'm in the right place.
Okay.
You kind of have to say that to yourself at some point.
One of my last questions.
Yes.
Why are you the best?
Why am I the best
Absolutely.
candidate?
Yeah.
Because I have proven results. There are many things that have been very difficult to do at the city that I've been able to accomplish. One of those is Jefferson Elementary School. Now, we see PUSD closing campuses and they remain empty. Look at Linda Vista, right? They remain empty for years. Jefferson was never, ever empty, because I jumped in with the city manager and we signed an MOU to use that campus. And that is probably, we've brought kids back with the central library. We have fire training programs there. That is very, very difficult to do, and it got approved by the school board. So that's one area where I've proven results of increasing services to the community. Secondly, on affordable housing, I have worked on the 3 projects in my district. I have also, I'm working on expanding the definition of our inclusionary zoning and increasing that so we can get more of a mix of housing, but I do know how to do these things. So that's the result there. On the environment, I have a lot of results in the environment. The ban on leaf blowers, This last city council kind of just kept it at bay. I brought it back and brought it through. How? Because we supported small businesses. Small businesses have applied for 1,200 vouchers from the state to replace their leaf blowers. And that's going to make a huge impact on the populations affected the most, which is the gardeners, and on our quality of life. I'm also on the board of Foothill Transit. I'm also the president of Burbank Airport, and we're building a brand new terminal. Again, proven results. I'm working on the financing for that. We are going to get a brand new terminal started in 2024, $1.2 billion. And I don't know that most candidates could do that.
No, well,
have the background to be able to do that.
Well, I certainly appreciate the not wake up at 7 a.m. on Saturday from the gas blowers, but how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more information about your campaign?
Yes, so my website is FeliciaForPasadena.com, and I'm also on Instagram and Facebook with that, and you can email there, you can volunteer there. We'd love to have volunteers. A big part of my campaign is bringing people together. And also making sure that government's transparent. And so having people, a wide range of people involved in the campaign will be really helpful. And that's how people can get hold of me. And also my issues and endorsement, all that stuff is also on the website. So all the stuff we didn't get to talk about is on my website.
My guest today has been Vice Mayor Felicia Williams, City of Pasadena. She's running for re-election for her City Council District 2 seat. We've had a pretty interesting conversation. Thank you so much for being here, and I think I understand you a little bit better now. And
you as well. This is a great start of a great Conversation.Live going forward.
Absolutely. Make sure you, if you want to read more of my articles, make sure you check in with our friends at the Los Angeles Progressive. But until we have another opportunity to speak with you, as always, agape.